This is Enrich Your Life, a podcast about financial health, all things investing, life planning, and smart decisions with Richard Limegruber.
Welcome to Enrich Your Life podcast. Your host, Richard Limegruber. I want to thank LMC Media and Vectorly Studios who help produce this podcast. If it wasn't for both of those, we wouldn't be able to do this. So thank you so much. I want to welcome our guest, Joel Solomon, a former hedge fund manager turned prosperity coach, TEDx speaker, and author of 3 best-selling books, including The 9 Money Rules Millionaires Use. Joel's mission is to help people overcome limiting beliefs standing between them and true financial freedom. We'll be talking about connection between mindset, gratitude, and money, and how anyone can create their own money mindset or money miracle, right, as you put it. So without further ado, I'm excited to welcome you, Joel, to the podcast, and thanks for joining us, and thanks for sharing all the wisdom that you've been able to accumulate.
Thank you so much for having me, Rich. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here today.
You know, through the years, we both network a lot, and I've met you on several different occasions. And one of the things that you always mention is that you're working on a new book, right? And you've already published 3 or 4
Correct.
different books. So I'm excited to share that. You just gave me the signed copy of 9 Money Rules Millionaires Use. So we'll be exploring some of the things that we've obviously talked about in that book. But Joel, as a financial advisor, you know, I oftentimes see how emotions can influence people's decisions. Fear, scarcity, anxiety, even guilt about doing certain things because they feel they don't deserve it, perhaps, right? And it really stops people from making decisions in life. And so they might hesitate to invest because maybe they've gotten bad results in the past. They may delay planning for estate planning because it's an inevitable conversation about what happens when you pass away. Or they might hold too much cash because they're just too afraid to invest it, right? So what happens is their past might be determining what their future is because they're holding on to their past, right? So what's fascinating about you and I and what we both do is that we're both trying to help people transform and help them achieve their goals, but we kind of do it a little bit differently, right? So mine is rooted in strategy and planning, and yours is more rooted in energy and mindset. So that being said, I wanted to just start off and give you the opportunity. How did you get to where you are today, and what brought you here to this podcast, to where you are writing all these wonderful books, helping people overcome what's blocking them from achieving their goals?
Yes, so I did start my careers in traditional financial services. I started my career as an actuary, and you may know the difference between an actuary and an accountant. An actuary looks at his feet when he talks to you. An accountant looks at your feet when they talk to you. Yeah, they say an accountant is an actuary with charisma. But I'm not the typical actuary. I did go through all the exams. I am a fellow of the Society of Actuaries, a life insurance actuary. Still keep up through the continuing education and information. So I could still sign the financial statements of an insurance company if they wanted me to. But I went through all the exams. I was doing that job and really not loving getting up in the morning. And I had a hobby, which was analyzing stocks. And I said to myself in 1992, 93, if I could ever align my hobby and my career, it wouldn't be work, it'd be fun.
Right.
And so I reached out to many actuaries on Wall Street, and I got consensus, absolute doubt, tons of rejection. Everyone I said, just stay where you are. You're an actuary. You can't come here and be a professional money manager. And then I found one guy who gave me his path. And so I followed it mostly. And 15 years later, 2008, I became a professional hedge fund manager. And so
Timing couldn't have been worse.
Timing couldn't have been worse. So my goal is to ensure that my long road can lead to everyone who's listening shortcut.
Yeah.
Right. And so I don't want you to have to take 15 years to achieve your dream. But yes, in 2008, I became a professional money manager at Citi. The market was down 40% that year, financial stocks. But that was the year that, people really were scared, talking about fear. I had friends calling me up and saying, Joel, should I take my money out of my bank account? Because they were literally scared of a run on the bank.
Yeah.
And at Citi, the stock cratered from $40 to 96 cents.
It was down less than $1. I remember that.
Yeah.
I do remember that, yeah.
The next year was better, a lot better, and basically won the lottery. And I might actually still be there, but there was a law that was passed that said banks can't own hedge funds. So we were all laid off, which gave me the kick in the butt to actually achieve my true dream, which was to have my own fund.
Great.
So I raised the money, hired the required service providers, and in June of 2013, I launched Solomore Capital. And again, I might still be doing that, except I went to a personal development course a few years later, and two things happened there that completely changed my life. First, we had a guest speaker speaking for 1 hour about stocks and stock options. And when he spoke about options in particular, he made it sound easy. He said, you don't need much time, you don't need much money. This is how the rich get rich, and options are essentially risk-free. And I was sick to my stomach. It was day 2 of the conference, and people were tapping me on the shoulder, whispering me, or Joel, does this make sense? Are options really riskless? So I was polite. After he was done, we went out of the auditorium. I said, please don't do this.
Right.
He has no idea about any of you individually, and most importantly, no idea about your belief that you become rich using stock options.
Right. So I'm going to stop you right there just so our guests know and our listeners know that there are a lot of risks when it comes to options,
absolutely.
Because it's a multiplying effect.
Yeah, it's
You
leverage.
can make money very fast. You can
lose it all.
extremely fast,
Yeah.
right? So that's one of the things. Like I get chills when you just said that. How could a professional come out and say that to people? It's completely a lie, right?
Yeah, it was. And so that happened.
Okay.
And then the second thing that happened was we were given a wooden board, 2 inches thick, and we were told we're going to break it with our bare hand. Have you done it?
Nope.
Well, the exercise was called Obstacles Are Illusions. And on one side of the board, we had to write our biggest obstacle. And then on the other side of the board, our ultimate goal, which stumped me for a while. And then it hit me. Make everyone in this room financially free. Make everyone in this room financially free. And then a few minutes later, I broke the board like everyone else did in that room, 200 people. I went home that night, couldn't sleep. First, the guy was in my head, and I realized if I could ever get up the courage to speak on a stage, because my biggest fear that day was public speaking,
Sure.
I could teach people the truth about money, not lie to them, and be of service. And then the second thing going on in my head at 3:34 in the morning was that wooden board staring back at me from across my bedroom, actually half of it. Make everyone in this room financially free. And it hit me at 4:30. I jumped out of bed. I quickly got dressed. I was at my office in Midtown Manhattan before the sun rose. I sent an email to my investors telling them I'm giving them the money back. I'm shutting down my fund.
Wow.
I figured out my true purpose in life, to help others become financially free, to teach them the truth about money.
Yeah.
And
there's a lot of truths, right? And there's a lot of different strategies. And you know, I think ultimately the idea of an advisor or somebody like us is that we just have to show people the way and give them the confidence. Right?
Well, there's a lot of people, true, and there's a lot of people out there who are not telling people the truth about money. One of the truths is there's hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of ways to become rich.
Mm-hmm.
And look, out of the 200 people in the room, probably 5 were going to become rich using stock options. Then out of the other 195, it could be real estate. It could be crypto. It could be your business. It could be YouTube monetization. I mean, there's almost an infinite number of ways to become rich, right?
Sure.
And so by telling, what I teach is first, what's your passion? What are you interested in? Because that's where you're going to be much more likely to be making a lot more money, become more prosperous. So first, find your passion. And then you got to be interested in learning about it, not having somebody force it on you, say, this is the way.
Right.
If somebody wants to learn something from me, I'll teach them, right? Because they're interested. They come to me.
Yeah.
Like Raphael came to me in 2019, and he was living in poverty consciousness. He hadn't taken a vacation in 20 years. He was still wearing the same boots for the last 3 years of his life. And he came to me and he said, Joel, I saw what you've done. I saw your transition. I want to learn everything you know about stocks because I believe that's the way to become rich. I said, I'll do that, but first we need to work on the mindset.
Right.
Because if you don't have a strong foundation and I teach you stocks, it's going to crumble.
Right.
So the first step is mindset. So I worked with him on creating individualized affirmations. We used audio files so that he knew that he could become rich. Now, he believed he could become rich using stocks to begin with.
Right.
But we had to work on these poverty-conscious actions he was taking because actions are a really good tell on your beliefs. Sure. So worked on that, got him from feeling fear and worry about money to expectation and fun. He expected the money to flow. And after spending, he really wanted to learn everything I knew, so it took many years. It took 2.5 years.
Right.
He got to a point where he was comfortable investing.
I mean, so, and for our listeners, I think, when I explain to somebody who's coming in and speaking to me about being financially stable or what have you, I say, there's a cost to it. There's some time to it. And their question is, well, is what we're paying for the actual financial plan? And I say, well, that's the data part of it. Your entire experience and you paying attention to what's going on now is going to make you make better decisions.
Exactly.
Because I'm asking you a question about, well, let's talk about your cash flow. Never even thought about my cash flow. What should I be thinking of? Every time you spend your money, you should be thinking about, is this going to help me or hurt me, right?
Right.
And if you're now having that mindset, and mindset suggests that you have the awareness.
Correct.
Right? And it's the same thing. Like if somebody had to get from point A to point B, they're not going to get there just by getting in a car and driving. First, they got to think about how do they have to get there.
Right. You got to put the car in gear.
Do I take my car? Do I have to take a bus? So you got to figure things out. And that's the same thing with what, I guess, mindful money management is, right? What is one money mindfulness practice that you teach your readers that have changed how they spend, how they save and invest?
I think the most important part of mindful money management is really not operating from a place of fear, as you started out the conversation, right? And a lot of people are operating from fear. So the first point is to get away from the emotions of fear and worry and scarcity, the low vibration emotions. So when you're operating from mindful money management, your mindfulness, you're taking action from a place of expectation, high vibrations, appreciation, gratitude, fun, joy, love, passion. Those high vibrations will generate more abundance in your life. So being mindful to me means being aware of what your emotions are before you take the action. And if you're not feeling those high vibration emotions, if there's some fear or worry involved, then stop and shift those low vibration emotions. And I have techniques that I teach my clients of how to move out of those low energy, fearful feelings to high vibration feelings, which you can then make better decisions from.
Yeah. And so that's something very similar to what I do is I say, when I provide strategies or recommendations, one of the expectations you should have of me is an education, right? And that education can help overcome some of those fears. So somebody might say, oh, I've heard, you could lose all your money in the stock market. Well, that's not necessarily true. There's ways to mitigate risk. And when you teach them, hopefully that will result in reducing their fears. And then it takes experience too, right? So you have to be able to try it a little bit and realize maybe I was wrong in those fears, right?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I give the example of first, it's what's your belief and are you willing to be open-minded enough to know that it's a belief and not a truth? This happened once many years ago and actually as recently as this past week where when I first started coaching people, a woman came to me and said, stock market's risky. I've been keeping my money in cash. There's no way I'm ever going to invest in the stock market. I've seen what's happened in the past. No. And so I said, okay, but that there are examples where people have made a lot of money in the stock market. Are you open to changing that belief? Because do you know that that's a limiting belief?
Right.
And she said, no, there's no way I'm doing that. And I said, okay, So she was closed-minded.
Yep.
I did a workshop this week in Manhattan and had a similar experience with a woman. And you know what she said to me? That's impossible. I said, I have documented results.
Right.
She said, no, nobody can do that. Like Warren Buffett can't do that. Nobody can do that. So I said, do you believe that that's a limiting belief or an empowering belief? And she's like, no, that's the truth. And I'm like, okay, well, so if you're open-minded and willing to change beliefs, then I can help you.
Yeah.
But if you're closed-minded, not willing to change your beliefs, then I can't help you. And so that people fill out a financial freedom survey before they start working with me. And I ask them what their beliefs are in, is this statement true? Is this statement false? So on and so forth, with dozens of statements. And if they're not willing to change a belief, be open-minded, then they're not coachable.
Right.
And
well, that's the same old phrase, you can lead a horse to the water, you just can't make them drink it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, look, like we talked about earlier, there are many, many ways to become prosperous. And if you're not open-minded to seeing the possibilities, the infinite possibilities that are out there, then, people like us can't help you.
Right.
And so they have to be willing to say, okay, I realize that this is fearful thinking. I realize that this is a limiting belief. And can you help me shift it?
Mm-hmm.
And then I can help them. But
Correct.
Look, there's 8 billion people on the planet. There's probably, 7 billion people who need our help, and probably only 70 million who are available, open-minded, and are in that Venn diagram of willing to be helped. So that's still plenty.
And sometimes it also takes somebody's experience to say, you know what, I don't want to ever have to experience it again. So the fear is actually pushing them to do something different, right?
Yeah, it can be.
It can be, right, exactly. So, many people separate financial decisions from the emotional ones, right? And I always say, one of the first things I learned when I became a financial advisor is we cannot control our emotions, but we can control how we react to each emotion, right?
Yeah.
So how do you show that financial decisions and emotional ones are deeply entwined, and how can our listeners begin to bridge that divide?
Yeah, like I said earlier, I think it really is related closely, because past experiences tend to make you feel a certain way about potential future experiences. So
even though they might not have had a Joel or a Rich to help them with those decisions, and they did it themselves and messed up.
Right. And so, what I say is having somebody who is holding your hand, an accountability partner, a coach who's helping you through making decisions in a better way can help. And so, yes, I think they're very intertwined. So when I was managing money for Citigroup between 2008 and 2012 and staring at 4 screens and seeing in 2008, 98% of all those stock tickers going down during the Lehman crisis in September of 2008. And, I like I said, I was investing in financials. So all those 90% of those stocks were, so 90% of those stocks were financials. And so I saw the fear. Right. So it was reflected in the movement of the stocks. And so I have a lot of people in my network who are empaths. They really feel other people's feelings, to an extreme. And so I was kind of being that way, because I saw from the stock price movements how much fear and worry there is around the world reflected, because there's millions of decisions being made in 600 different stocks, right? Yeah. And they're all being reflected in those
who's
stock
buying
price
and who's
moves.
Selling, right? Why do some people buy? They have less fear. Why are some people selling on the exact same day with the exact same news?
Right.
Opportunity versus fear, right?
Exactly. And so it's really separating the opportunity from the emotion and saying, okay, look, there is as recently as this week in the stock market, there was some big moves with some concerns about some bankrupt companies. Jamie Dimon talking about the cockroach. Usually if there's one credit event, there's multiple credit events.
Sure.
And so people get scared and they operate based on fear rather than, wait a second, I was actually telling people in my InvestSmart engine, I have I've been giving people the results of my 5-step stock screen the last few months, and so we have a group meeting. So we had a group meeting yesterday, and I said, look, this is probably a really great opportunity if you can look out 1 to 2 to 3 years.
Sure.
Because when these stocks are not moving on fundamentals, they're moving on fear,
yep.
Then as an individual, you can take advantage of that. And I know, having been a professional investor at a large corporation, my colleagues and I got tapped a number of times over the 4 years to sell as the market's going down, because the risk managers seeing more volatility and their average risk factor goes up when there's more movement in the stock prices. And usually that's the best time to buy for the longer term. But this is happening not just in one bank, but in hundreds of banks across the globe, right? And so they all have the same measurement systems.
They all have the knowledge, but they're seeing people sell. And I was just giving this example to a client yesterday, is like, when you have good fundamentals, like you said, the economy's doing well, things are doing great around, and then all of a sudden the market starts going down because they start to hear noise. I call it noise, right? That noise is usually coming from news stations that want you to continue to listen so they can sell more advertisements.
Right.
So they're going to tell you the worst things because they want you to hold on to your seat and continue to watch them, creating fear and anxiety. Then people sell, but that's an opportunity. Markets going down, if they're not going down a substantial amount, is a healthy thing because you're giving people an opportunity to get back in. Right? You give them, So in your book, the 9 money rules millionaires use, you provide a mixture of spiritual tools, practical ideas, and exercises for increasing money flow. Was there one rule that surprised even well-off readers that you want to share?
Yes. The most controversial of the 9 money rules is don't diversify. And so here's the background. When I was professionally managing money, 2008 to 2016, now before that I was an analyst, so I saw other portfolio managers and how that went. But for those years where I was the portfolio manager, those 8 years, each year that I was managing money, I wrote down my top 5 highly convicted, highest belief ideas. And those 5 ideas each year generated more than 100% of the return of the overall portfolio, meaning the other 60, 70, 80, 90 stocks, depending on the year, lost me money on average.
Okay.
And so I was thinking about this. I get a lot of ideas when I jog. I jog pretty much every day. And I said, man, this would be an interesting concept to really look into.
Explore, yeah.
And so I did, and I found that Charlie Munger, who was the chairman of Berkshire Hathaway with Warren Buffett until he passed away a couple of years ago, he said the secret to successful investing is non-diversification. If you know nothing, diversify. Warren Buffett himself said, if I had my druthers, I would invest more than 50% of my net worth in one company. And then there's Peter Lynch from the 1990s. He was the portfolio manager of Fidelity Magellan and had the best return over a 10-year period of any mutual fund manager ever. He said for individual investors, the best investment strategy is to have 3 to 10 stocks.
Highly convicted.
Highly convicted. And so, and then let's go to modern portfolio theory, Harry Markowitz. So Harry Markowitz, and by the way, diversification comes from his theory, which has a lot of incorrect assumptions, like humans aren't emotional, like you got to make rational decisions, like risk is defined as the volatility of a stock overall, which why would I care if a stock has upside volatility, right? If it's going up more than the stock market overall every day, that's considered risky. To me, that's not risky.
That's value.
That's value,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Right.
So So anyway, Harry Markowitz said, even though everyone's using his theory as the reason to diversify, he said in his theory, in order to maximize returns, minimize the number of stocks you own. That's in his theory. But he said also that if you want to minimize your risk-adjusted return, and again, his risk definition is both upside and downside volatility, then you diversify.
Right. And the way that I put it is I always try to diversify within time frames. So money that you need in the next 1 to 3 years, you shouldn't be taking any risk on that, right? So that should be the cash, the liquidity. Money 4 to 7 years, you want to have provide income, outpace inflation, buy some bonds, buy some large cap value. But any money 7+ years out, that's the money that you can take the risk on, because if you look at the S&P 500 over the last 100 years, on average, the S&P pulls back and has a correction every 7.1 years. Right. So what I explain to clients is the riskier money, that's the money that you're not going to have to worry about for at least 7 years. If it's in a stock and you're down, that was money we had allocated that you weren't going to need for at least 7 years. So I understand what you're saying, but there also could be diversification when it comes to time frames.
Yes.
Not so much diversification within the individual stocks, right? Okay. So that was a very, you're right, that is controversial because everybody always talks different about that. So which rule do most people resist and why?
Well, I think that is the one they most resist.
Okay.
And again, rule number one is when you believe. And so again, if you're open to change, if you're open to saying, okay, this is not the truth, and I'm willing to change this belief, then it's okay. But some people are very hesitant about changing their beliefs, and they don't even realize that it's a belief.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so
they think it's fact.
This happened at the workshop that I gave a workshop in Manhattan this week, and this woman said, I was giving them the opportunity to come into my Money Miracles membership at a 90% discount for the month.
That's great.
And she said that the reason why she wasn't signing up is that people don't buy from people until they've had 7, on average, connections with that person. And I said, well, is that a limiting belief or an empowering belief?
No, it's definitely limiting.
So she said, that's the truth. And I said, again, is it limiting you or empowering you? As an entrepreneur, she is an entrepreneur. As an entrepreneur, could that be limiting you? Is it possible that the average for you could be different?
Right.
And the average for you could be a one-touch. And so it's really interesting to ask yourself what your beliefs are on various topics, on various actions are a really good tell on your beliefs.
Sure.
So how are you acting? Like I had one client who came to me with massive poverty consciousness, even though he's a financial advisor. He was taught by his dad to get a piece of wood and put it at the end of the toothpaste tube and roll it forward so you don't miss a drop of toothpaste. And at 55 years old, he's still doing this 45 years later, even though he's making hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
Right? And so I said to him, what is that action saying about a belief? Are you believing that the world's massively abundant? Are you believing that you need to get that last drop because there's not enough?
And I think that comes from the experience, right? So I mean, one of the things I always explain to clients is that when you come from affluent families, you tend to waste a lot of money because you're used to the money. The people who are building careers and working their butts off and trying to do better for themselves always come from a place of distress, right? And I always explain to people that we were a middle-class family growing up on Long Island, and we had what we had and we weren't complaining about it, but we would always want more, right? That's what drove me to say I'm not gonna be at the point in my life where I can't afford anything, right?
Right.
And it drove me to change my beliefs. It drove me to change my actions,
Right, exactly.
to do something differently, right?
Yeah, so it's belief, actions, words, thoughts, all of that combined together.
Yeah.
And so how you brought up doesn't mean you have to act that way as an adult.
Sure.
But if you're never coached, then you're still operating from lack and poverty consciousness, even in your 50s when you don't need to be.
Sure.
And that kind of life creates more stress, even though for probably 90% of the world, the guy I'm talking about who I coached, is living the dream life of 90% of the world. He's still operating from lack and poverty consciousness so that he's not enjoying the life that he has. So he could be operating from a place of gratitude and appreciation, which is rule number 5 in the 9 money rules millionaires use. But he was operating from a place of worry and fear.
That's great.
Right? And so you have a choice.
Yeah.
You know, how you grew up, even if you grew up affluent, there are a lot of affluent people I know who are still operating from a place of poverty consciousness.
Right.
And there are people who grew up with, barely making ends meet, who are now have changed their thinking and their actions so that they're operating from an abundance mindset.
Great. And so moving on, oftentimes, I have clients come to me and they ask me, how much money do I need to retire? And my answer is always, well, it all really depends. There's a need that you're going to need, but there's also the wants, right? And so what I always say is your needs are probably similar to what other people's needs are, but the wants are going to be different. So your neighbor, your brother, your siblings, your children might think that, hey, this worked for this person, it's going to work for you, but that's not necessarily the case because everybody's needs and wants are different. So.
Right.
In your book, Infinite Love and Money, you suggest a spiritual or energetic dimension to wealth. How do you define abundance in that context, and why is love a part of that?
Yeah, because I think everything comes from the frequency, right? And so we talked about earlier, if you're operating from this frequency of love, passion, joy, gratitude, appreciation, that's actually the highest vibration. And that frequency is the same frequency as abundance and prosperity.
So
and
that's like energy bringing.
Right.
Yeah, right,
you're
right.
attracting more abundance and prosperity into your life. Imagine if you were ecstatic, just full of passion and love and joy and appreciation and just completely ecstatic 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Of course, you'd be attracting more abundance and prosperity into your life, right? So it just goes hand in hand. That's why Molly Singh and I co-wrote this book, Infinite Love and Money, because we truly believe that it goes hand in hand, love and abundance, love and prosperity. And she's a relationship coach, teaching people how to change the mindset, how to come together, to create more loving relationships. And as a prosperity coach, I want the people to have more prosperity, to have more love as well.
Yeah, that's and when you're saying this, this is how I grew up, and I wake up every day. I'm a morning person. People tend to not like morning people sometimes, especially if you're not. But I appreciate everything I ever have in front of me. I actually recognize that all of my hard work is paying off, and I have everything I need right in life, and I appreciate that. And I do attract more people because I have nothing to hide. And if you walk into a room and there's somebody who's not wanting to be there, you can tell. Right? If there's somebody in the room that loves what they're doing and they enjoy it, you're going to tell. You're going to see it from their expressions and everything else. And those are the people that I would want to go talk to. I don't want to go talk to the miserable people on the other side of the room because I don't want to be miserable. I want to be happy, and I want to stand around with happy people. And the old saying, if you want to be successful, hang out with successful people.
Yeah,
that's very similar, right?
Yeah.
So, you write about harmonizing your inner life through gratitude and visualization with your financial goals. Can you walk us through one of the visualization or gratitude exercises that you portray in the book?
Yes. So, yes, both of those are really, really powerful techniques. And what I'll say is for gratitude, as I said just before, it's the highest vibration. Normally what happens is people feel gratitude after something happens.
Okay.
Right? So
Yeah.
what about feeling gratitude right now for what you have? So I started this practice in 2012 after I read a book called How to Be Wildly Wealthy Fast by Sandy Forster. And she recommended writing down 3 to 5 things you're grateful for and why at the end of the day. I would go to sleep before 2012 thinking about all the things I could have done better that day, criticizing myself, worrying, being that perfectionist. And I tried. And of course, my sleep up until 2012 wasn't really good, but I started doing this practice. Completely changed my sleep, completely changed my outlook on life.
Yeah.
And it's a really powerful technique. So I highly recommend who's ever listening to write down 3 to 5 things you're grateful for and why. Now, Professor Seligman out of the University of Virginia did this study, I think 25, 30 years ago, where he connected electrodes to brain synapses of his students at the beginning of the 30 days and then had them write down 3 things they're grateful for before they go to sleep and why. Mm-hmm. At the end of the 30 days, he put the electrodes back on the brain to check the synapses, and they had actually expanded in the areas of happiness. So if you're writing down gratitude every day, you're actually expanding your brain. The brain is elastic, and the synapses are expanding. And how cool is that?
That's incredible. That's incredible. Well, I think you just answered my last question for you, which was what was the biggest shift in your own mindset that you've had? And how has that changed the way you think about money? So
that's a big one.
That's great. Yeah. That's really great. And so one of the things that we wanted to just mention is that you have a new book coming out, right?
Yes.
It's called Your Path to Purpose and Prosperity.
Yes. So I co-authored it with a purpose coach.
Okay.
And I truly believe, and as I mentioned earlier, that if you're on purpose, if you're doing your passion, you're going to be more prosperous. Mm-hmm. And so think about ways you can get to doing your purpose. And in this book, we have a lot of exercises. It's an interactive book. It's not, you're just reading.
Right.
But there's exercises throughout the book to be very introspective, to see how you can get on your path.
That's great.
And Jackie Roberge, who co-authored the book, she's an expert purpose coach, and she's been doing it for many years. So I'm excited to have this book come out shortly.
When's it coming out?
Good question. It'll be in the next few months.
Great.
In the next few months.
I'm looking forward to getting it and reading it myself. I think this is really, really helpful. So, do you have a website that anybody listening can go check out all your work?
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's solomore.com. So my company name is named after my daughters, Lauren and Morgan. So it's S-A for my last name, L-A-U-R for Lauren, M-O-R for Morgan.com. And halfway down the homepage, click on the link to sign up for In My Calendar, and I'll work with you to create a personalized roadmap.
Well, thank you very much. Well, that's for the first 20 listeners. So if you're listening and you're interested in finding out more, we'll put the link to Joel's website within the notes of this program. So, Joel, thank you so much for sharing your insights, your experience with us today. I've learned more than I thought I would actually learn, so that was really good. To our listeners, I hope you're walking away with some new perspective, some hope, some gratitude. And if you want to learn more about Joel, again, check out the new show notes. And as always, if you're looking for help with anything that we talked about today, I'm also here for you. You can reach out to us at hello@enrichlifepodcast.com. Don't forget to check out our website, enrichlifepodcast.com, as well as on YouTube and all of your podcast channels. And we look forward to sharing this wonderful information with you. Just remember, the tagline is always enrich yourself with everyday financial strategies. You just need to find which ones are right for you and your situation, right? So thank you very much again, and we look forward to seeing you.
Thank you, Rich.
You're welcome.